What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about if we're going to get an Avengers 2. Now, the thing with these kind of videos, and I know some people always kind of jump on me very, very early with them, is that, okay, you're talking about an Avengers 2, a Marvel's Avengers 2, right when the first game comes out. But I do want to have this discussion because it does bring in success of the first game. Was the first game successful, or was this game successful? It brings in, okay, how long do they actually go with these DLC, and then what they do afterwards too, because of how would you even structure a second game based off of what you did with the first game, and then again all of these additional characters that you're seemingly going to add to it. So we're going to talk about that all in this video. So let's kind of start, at the top. Well, one, did they end this game with the chance to make a second game? I think yes. At the same time, I've said this, I even said this in the ending explained video, I truly believe the reason for that ending was to set up the DLC for the first game, not necessarily a second game. Do you know what I mean? I think that that's something weird. There's no confirmation of that, by the way. That's just my theory. That's just my opinion on it. I think a lot of other people have that same theory, but it is kind of weird that when you see a game like this, oftentimes they do normally set up a sequel, or at least they leave it open for the possibility to make a second one. But for this specifically, I feel like they're just trying to do it where they can keep adding DLC characters, considering, again, that is their focus for the next while, okay, for the next long time. So you have that. Was the game successful? Well, that's a hard one. That's something that we have to kind of spend quite a bit of time discussing, right? Because I think the game probably did what it needed to do. Now, look, the game's sales, it's too early to tell. I think we'll get a whole lot more as the months go on. Obviously, early signs, people are trying to spin it into it's not doing as good as Spider-Man. And, I'm not trying to attack or defend, one or the other. But what I will say is, I think it's too early where you look at sales, and I know somebody said, it's like a third of the sales of Spider-Man. Well, the thing, and Spider-Man was on one console, you can take negatives from that. You can also take positives, though, in that I believe that was physical sales, not digital. And with the world we're living in now, Marvel's Avengers could have done very, very good digitally. Now, again, we have the beta stuff. What the beta did absolutely incredible. It'll be interesting to see how this game does. I think the beta, I think did 6 million. I'm pretty sure that was the number for the beta. I think for a game like this, and it is tough because if you have a game that you want to support with DLC characters for years, for 1 to 2 years, the game better sell, I'd say, very well. And then on top of that, it better sell even better if you want to get a second game, afterwards. And so I don't know their internal, projection of it. I feel like they probably would want it to hit somewhere in the 10 or higher range. I think that for a game like this to compete with Spider-Man, and not, by the way, not with even quality, but sales, because again, when it comes to corporation, it is pretty much about money in terms of, their decision-making of making more, Square Enix supporting it. I think, Spider-Man obviously sold over 10. The Arkham games, normally they are around the 10. I mean, that's a good kind of average, we can say, for the Arkham games. So I think 10 probably is where they would like to be. Something in my head says that it won't get to that mark. I could be wrong. And again, this is also very possibly an example of a game, and we've seen it before, a game that starts kind of rocky. And I don't think it's unfair to say that the beginning has been rocky. I've obviously had my opinions of this game, and the sales, haven't been the greatest thing in the world, but they also haven't been bad. And again, you look at where this game can go, it can add content. It can absolutely continue to increase its quality. I absolutely believe that. But I think the plan would be to make a second game. The problem with a second game is, where do you even start? Because you have your base 6, okay, with Marvel's Avengers, but then you're going to add, let's say, even to make it a good solid 20, let's say you're going to add 14. Now, I believe it's going to be 15 with the 16th being Spider-Man. I'm pretty sure that's what, how everything's going to kind of go. But let's just round and say 20 to make an even 20. How do you make a second game of Marvel's Avengers with 20 characters? And it's something that games normally in the fighting genre kind of often, or even maybe racing, maybe a Crash Team Racing, like those kind of genre games, I feel like that's a problem that they kind of run into, where it's all right, if you keep supporting them and you keep giving them DLC characters, what do you do for the next game? Some of those DLC characters, I think, absolutely need to make their way in the base roster, but you can't have all of them. And another thing you got to think of is you also need to add more, add some different things. So the way that they're going right now, okay, spoilers, is they're not going to do Guardians of the Galaxy, and they're not going to do, you can even say like the Eternals. They're not doing the X-Men, okay? So when you think of a second game, you can say, all right, you got to have, I think, some of the core members of the Avengers you had in this game. Ideally, you'd probably have all of them, right? Unless something, unless you wanted to like switch up the story, maybe you want to kill one off. I mean, you could obviously do that and stuff. Some of the DLC characters, you'd want to work their way in, and then you'd probably want to have a group of new characters enter the thing. But right there, you've already increased with Avengers 1 to Avengers 2, let's say 6 to 12. You've already maybe doubled your base roster size. And again, for a game like this, with the story, with these characters, but then with the online component being so fundamentally important, it's tough. It's honestly a very tough thing to start a game off like that, and then you have to say, okay, well now for the DLC for the second game, do we do some of the same DLC we did for the first game, or do we pick, again, different characters? It's difficult. I think that the general goal, look, you don't make Marvel's Avengers to make it one game. You really don't. I think, now there is, again, kind of like a caveat to that. You could make Marvel's Avengers to make it one game if you make it a game as a service kind of thing where it lasts multiple years. You're constantly making money. Now, the problem with that is, well, one, people don't love it when you do that. And secondly, this game, what I will give it credit for, is not necessarily that. There are some kind of weird things mixed in there, right, where you can give them, if they want to get money from you, there are ways that they are going to get money over the next couple of years, right, with all the cosmetics, with the DLC characters having their kind of like skins, locked behind like a $10 thing, right, like the kind of like the DLC packs that you're going to have to get. Again, you don't have to. You can, $10 each, right? So there are ways they can make money, but ultimately, unless they're planning on making a lot of money over the next 2 years, then the game probably was designed, or the idea was pitched to say, okay, we want to make a series of games. Either that, or we want to make one game, make it last a long time, make us get money through multiple years, and then we get a second game. And by the way, I'm not accusing Crystal Dynamics and all them, like the developers themselves, of that. Again, those are like businessy things from the top. I'm sure they want to make the best possible game they can. At the same time, again, you need to make money. And a game, by the way, with this kind of level, you do need to make money. And in order to have, by the way, 15, 16 DLC characters come out over the next 2 years, let's say, you can't do that for free. You're going to be relying on two things. One is initial very good sales, which if the game doesn't have, that does become very scary, because then it's like, okay, well, do they have to drop some of the DLC because they just don't have the money? And secondly, microtransactions throughout the years, that there's constantly a revenue stream flowing into Crystal Dynamics, but more importantly, Square Enix, to then support them, right? To allow them to make not just DLC, but then guess what? A second game. So I think, honestly, the idea of having a second game, look, anything's possible. I think right now it's pretty darn likely that, of course, you would make a second game. I do think, though, there is a little, it's not fun because we're talking about potentially canceling a game here, but I do think there is something there where, like, if things go wrong, if it doesn't sell well, if the DLC doesn't do well, if they're not really making, in which, by the way, we may find out, we may not find out, but like if they're not making money throughout the next couple of years because the initial sales weren't that good and then people just aren't playing it, so there's not a lot of microtransactions coming in, then it's like, can they actually sell a second game, or do they just do something completely different? Now, we know the Guardians of the Galaxy game, like that is another Marvel game that is in the works that they are doing, so you have to think about that as well. Do they say, okay, we wanted to have this team just constantly make Avengers games, but maybe we just have to pivot and have them do just another Marvel game, right? We have Guardians. Maybe, hey, you guys do a standalone blank game. Pick a Marvel character. You guys do a standalone blank game. Maybe we'll come back for Avengers 2 in a few years after that. Definitely some ways you can make it a bit more complicated, right? Switching things up. But as of right now, I would say the goal, or the idea of the company probably would have been to have a second Avengers game. Okay, so guys, let me know in the comments below. What do you think? Do you think an Avengers 2 is all but confirmed, right? Do you think that's kind of the plan going forward? Do you think that could change? Do you think potentially because of what happens with this game that maybe there won't be a second game. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, make sure you guys are subscribed to this YouTube channel, Podcast Now. Hit the bell icon so you guys know when all these videos go up, and thank you all so much for watching. I truly appreciate it, and I hope to see you all on the next Avengers video.